Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening to all that are tuning in from various parts of the world at different time zones. Thank you so much for making time. I'm delighted to be here, and I feel privileged to be reaching out to you to your spaces via Facebook Live hosted by the New England Aquarium. I am Dr. Nelly Isigi Kadagi. I am a 2019 New England MCAF Fellow, and I also work as the Director of the Education for Nature Program and Conservation Leadership Initiative at the World Wildlife Fund. In the next few minutes, I am so happy to have this opportunity to share a piece of work that has continued to fascinate me for over decades and also allowed me to work with an amazing group of scientists, collaborators, communities across the Indian Ocean region. So to get you started, I'm going to turn over to my slides. All right, so I'll be covering this work by exploring the gladiators of the sea, the Indian Ocean billfish species. And basically, I would like to go through a little bit of billfish biology, some of the work we are doing, and how these results are feeding into the big picture. But just before I jump into the biology, I started working on billfish in 2010 out of curiosity of wanting to know, where do these fish come from? Where do these magnificent fish go? Who is catching them? How big can they grow? Just those basic questions that any researcher would want to ask. Before I knew it, I found myself pursuing a master's at the North Carolina State University, where my research focused on mathematical modeling on sailfish dynamics in the West Indian Ocean region. One would think that would be enough, but I proceeded on to pursue a PhD at the University of Florida, where again I kept asking questions on how can we bring together socioecological factors in order to understand billfish species in the West Indian Ocean region. And so to dive in a little bit into the biology, just a minute. Great. So billfish are highly migratory species that occur across the subtropical and tropical oceans of the world. And I think before I keep going deeper, I want to recognize the presence of children in the audience, because I would like you to remember these little facts about billfish and be in a position to share with your parents, with your friends, and also with your teachers, because it's just very cool to learn about these majestic species. And so they are large predatory, moving across the oceans, highly migratory. And when we talk about billfish, we appreciate their big size. They can grow really, really big, between 3 to 5 meters, and weigh up to 2,000 pounds. So in terms of kilogram, we're looking at a billfish that is between 900 to 1,000 kilos. Now, in things that we see on daily basis, I'm thinking of a cat. So think about a fish that can weigh close to the weight of a cat. Billfish are known or characterized by their bill or rostrum that they use to navigate and also for hunting within the waters. And particularly sailfish, on my right side of the slide, are characterized by their dorsal, large dorsal that runs across their body, giving them their name sailfish. To move on with a little bit facts about billfish, these species start very tiny when females deposit their eggs in the water column. So this is external fertilization, and those eggs will float, get fertilized, float within the water column, grow into larvae, to juvenile, and finally billfish. And so we are talking about a plate size, small or baby marlin or sailfish, to a gigantic, majestic species that can grow up to 2,000 pounds. So that is something that is just fascinating about these species. They can move really fast, and although it's still debatable, sailfish, for instance, can move up to speeds of between 70 to 80 miles per hour, making them one of the fastest fish that swim in our ocean, hence the name gladiators of the sea. So to get you from the biology, I really would like to travel with you and bring you to the Indian Ocean, our area of focus. So looking at the oceans, I said billfish are found in the different oceans, but I really would like to bring you close home to the place that has continued to inspire me and others to look at these species in greater detail. And so our work focuses across the West Indian Ocean region, several countries, coastal countries, and also island countries. But before I talk about our work, I want to appreciate the history of bill fishing in coastal East Africa. And for those who read, you might have come across one of the American writers who wrote The Old Man and the Sea. His name is Ernest Hemingway. In his books, he talks about him fishing for billfish or large game fish species across the east coast of Africa. And one of those was a marlin, of course, which has made coastal East Africa one of the hotspot bill fishing destinations in the world. And so moving on, when we come to the Indian Ocean region and specifically the east coast of Africa, we find 6 species of billfish. We have the swordfish, black marlin, shortbill spearfish, which is elusive, the blue marlin, sailfish, and striped marlin. Now, I said shortbill spearfish is elusive because over the last 10 years of doing this work, I've only come across less than 5 records. But one thing to note about these species is that while we put them under one umbrella of billfish species, scientists, researchers, and even our captains, anglers across the world have helped us to be able to identify these species in that we can tell this is a swordfish, this is a blue marlin, based on the characteristics of the body. Apart from just these species being caught in various fisheries, they are ecologically important as apex predators. And so sitting at the top of the ecosystem plays a big role when it comes to balancing what is happening in our oceans. When we look at billfish research in the Indian Ocean region of Africa, it takes me back to appreciate the over 25 years of work that has been conducted through the African Billfish Foundation in collaboration with the sport fishing communities across Africa and across the world. And so in the 1980s, a lot of billfish used to be landed, but a group of sport fishing communities came together and say, how about we try and contribute to the science and knowledge about these billfish species? And so tagging started in the early 80s. And when I talk about tagging, it's basically a special hydroscopic plastic that's deployed under the dorsal of the billfish, and it helps us to track where the billfish has been caught, where it will be recaught, and some other information that helps us to know what's happening to these species as they move across the ocean. Now, this is conventional tagging using plastic tags, but at the same time, science has really advanced in our region and also across the world, where satellite telemetry tags have been deployed on billfish, and we are able to tell how far they dive horizontally, how far they move across the ocean, and where do they go. And so when I talk about tagging, it brings me to the tagging trends. So since the 90s, on my left, this is data showing the different species, the fluctuations in the number of fish tagged. But basically what I want to tell you is that for the last 25 years of this work, over 50,000 billfish species have been tagged across East Africa, and this has helped us to continue unraveling information about these species. On my left is a cool picture that I like to show, and when I talk to kids about how highly migratory these species are, they tell me, can we see? And so this picture shows the little dots are coming from Kenya, where most of the tagging has happened across the East Africa coastline, and the big dots are where the fish ended. And so over the 20 plus years of doing this work, we've had billfish recaptured in the Arabian Sea off the west coast of Australia. We've had some species recaptured down further south in South Africa. And as you can see in this diagram, these species are just playing all over the place. And so it helps us to keep asking ourselves, what more can we do to continue understanding these species that have proved to us that they are really nomads and they are not limited to a certain transboundary or national jurisdiction. And so when I speak about this work, whether it's a local audience or at an international platform, I like to bring to life the many people that have helped to bring this work to the platform that it is today. And I appreciate the citizen science, the effort that has gone into this. Over the last 10 plus years of working on this, I have had the privilege of sitting down with sport fishing captains and crews who've taught me a lot about billfish. I had someone ask me a question, Nelly, do you fish? I said, not really, but I could call myself a fisherwoman because through these guys, I'm able to think about these questions and go back to them and ask, because to me, they are my number one scientists. I've also had the privilege of sitting down with small-scale fishers, artisanal fishers across East Coast of Africa in terms of, are you getting these billfish tags? And one cool story I like to tell is a story where I ended up in Pemba. That's a small island of Tanzania, north of Tanzania. And my main mission was to get some billfish tags from the artisanal fishers. And one fisher looked at me and said, I have what you're looking for, and you have to promise me that you're not going to tell anyone. And so he walked me up to his homestead, told me to wait outside. And he said, but you know what? I hide these tags underneath my bed. That was the most interesting part of science, where you realize that as one person, you're studying these species, but somebody else looks at them differently. And so it's been great over the years to be able to bring together all these communities so that we can continue understanding these species. And so when I think about those questions, we divide it into different components. And so through the Marine Conservation Action Fund, supported by the New England Aquarium, one of the things that we've been able to do with my team is to understand the interactions between billfish species and the various fishing sectors that target this fish. And so we are looking at recreational fisheries or sport fisheries, those that are going out to catch for fun or for luxury, artisanal fishers that catch these species for food or as a source of livelihood, and also industrial fishing fleets that target these species either for commercial purposes, especially those swordfish, but also being caught as bycatch most of the time. And so our work through the MCAF grant helps to answer the question, how are these different sectors competing or interacting within the system when we look at billfish as a flagship species? And we've been able to get cool results that have led us to really think about the key issues that are impacting billfish, not only on the east coast of Africa, but also across the Indian Ocean region, given their expansive area. And so when we look at these species from a big picture, we are seeing limited information, gaps in whatever we know. We still really don't know how much billfish is coming, for instance, from small-scale fisheries, yet over 65% of small-scale fisheries occupy places like the West Indian Ocean region. When we look at the species in general, particularly for the Indian Ocean region, 3 of these species, blue, black, and striped marlin, are considered overfished. For those in the room, what I mean by overfished is when you have fish and you're expecting to catch as more, but you realize that you've caught to an extent that you can't catch to that maximum number that you expected. And so apart from just being overfished, there are these multiple competing needs. As I said, one looks at billfish for fun, the other looks at billfish as a source of food, and the other looks at billfish from a large scale perspective of making income. And the other thing is climate change, which we cannot leave out of the equation, especially right now with the shifting dynamic in our world. And so for billfish that depend on diving, depend on moving across the oceans for spawning, reproduction, and feeding, we have to look at how is climate change impacting oxygen levels? How is climate change impacting the temperatures at which these species can spawn? And so when you look at those pictures, the picture on my right of the slide is what we are seeing in terms of the numbers of billfish that have been caught since the 1950s. And this is mostly industrial data coming from large-scale fisheries. We still have a lot of gaps when it comes to recreational and small-scale fishery in our part of the world. And so with these key issues, we have to keep asking those questions. How can we be in a position to understand these factors in 2020? And so one of the work that my team and I are doing is through this regional project, assessing the billfish interaction, livelihoods, and linkages for fishery sustainability in the West Indian Ocean region. This is work that spans across 6 countries: Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, South Africa, and Madagascar, funded by the West Indian Ocean Marine Science Association, or in short, WIOMSA, and brings together a diverse group of institutions that are interested in this work, a diverse group of collaborators. The other piece of work that we combine to continue answering this question is, hang on, what is happening to my slides? Okay. The other piece of work that we combine to continue answering this question is this next project that is funded to one of our scientists, Dr. Nina Wambiji, through the 2020 Marine Fellowship. And this work enables us to expand from the 6 countries, include 4 more countries. We're talking about Seychelles, Mauritius, Comoros, and other island nations that the WIOMSA grant has not been able to cover. And so somebody would ask, where do you go after this? Basically, I've shown you that billfish, depending on what the data is showing, move across the oceans, are targeted by different species, different communities. But we need to know, what do catches look like? Are these billfish related when we look at the North and South Indian Ocean? And so that leads us to our genetic component in this study. How important are these billfish species? I can tell you they are well sought after by sport fisheries, but can we quantify how much sport fishery brings to the table in terms of billfish? Can we quantify how much small-scale fisheries bring onto the plate in terms of billfish species? And lastly, can we tell the impact of commercial fisheries? And so these projects combined together helps us to think about these factors in a sort of like large scale perspective. And so when we also think about this work in terms of implications, we are looking at not only billfish, but the marine environment. And for a species like billfish that we have competing needs, as I said, how can we balance those competing needs at the same time that ensure billfish species can continue to move in our oceans now and for future generations? Because if I'm talking about the 1980s or the 1930s when Ernest Hemingway came to our ocean, then I really would love my grandchildren in the next 30 years or 40, 50 years to be in a position to talk about this majestic species. And so our work contributes to the question of how can we sustainably manage this species. The other thing, when you talk about a transboundary species such as billfish, you're thinking about not only Kenya as a country, for instance. So Kenya has a billfish population, but as I say, these species are moving across the country. They do not understand the national boundaries. And so our work contributes to bringing together all those facets of national fisheries institutions and also countries to think about policies and actions that can feed into the governance of these species from a national and regional standpoint. And lastly, we cannot forget about people. When I talk about fish, most people get interested about fish from how it looks like on their plate. But fish, I tell people, is very political because of the many things that are tied to it. And so our work basically feeds into understanding how species such as billfish can help contribute to sustaining coastal livelihoods for people that depend on it. But on a broad scale, countries of the coast in the coastal East Africa and also small island nations are thinking about developing their blue economy. We are thinking about sustainable development goals. And some of it is how can we ensure food, economic, cultural factors are secured? And so our work contributes to the bigger picture of solving or achieving some of those national priorities or sustainable development goals that countries are signed to. And we think about that as we continue to move across these countries and across those components that we are studying. And so when I stand here to present this work, I also would like to recognize the amazing team that has not helped me to keep inspired about this work, but they bring the expertise on board. And so for a project that spans across 10 countries and over, we bring on board country coordinators to help us answer these questions at local level and feed into the national perspective. We also have international collaborators that come on board to also assist in terms of like knowledge sharing and also making sure that this research does not just stay within the region, but also gets shared across the globe. And thanks to the New England Aquarium for giving me this platform to talk about this as well. And now, when I started, I said that I was curious about understanding these species as a student, and it led me to pursuing my master's and also PhD on the same species. And so one thing that I'm very big about, and I'm happy to also know that my team pushes for this, is ensuring that capacity building can be sustained in the region so that more and more scientists and emerging researchers can talk about billfish. And so on our project, we have 9 students. So I get the privilege of supervising 9 students with my colleague, 2 PhDs, 5 masters, and 2 undergraduates who are bringing on board amazing energy, lots of questions, and I can't wait to see the kind of science and research that these scientists are going to put out there in the world. So be on the lookout for these scientists that will be grazing our platforms in the near future. And so when I think about where I started, I also keep asking myself, how can we continue to contribute to the pipeline of scientists in the region and also across the world? And I borrowed this idea from one of my MCAF fellow, Dr. Asha DeVos, who talks about having coastal heroes at every coast around the globe. And so our work not only focuses on graduate or undergraduate students, we also reach out to high schoolers, we reach out to young kids to get them excited, not only on billfish, but when we think about the marine environment, there are many components and species that kids can get excited, and not just to become a marine scientist. We also need policymakers, we need politicians that can talk about the ocean in a way that they understand it so that things can change as well. Lastly, I get this question a lot. How can we contribute to this work? For us, what we would request is talk about billfish, help people understand, help us create the awareness, because when you think about, again, a highly migratory species like this, one person cannot do this work alone. My team of collaborators cannot do this work by ourselves. And so we need you to be able to spread the awareness, tell your children, tell your friends, tell anyone about these magnificent species that continue to fascinate us. The other way that you can help this work is to support the New England Aquarium. Through their work, they are able to support scientists like me and many others across the globe to continue doing this work and bringing to life what we need to understand about the different species in our ocean. Thank you again. You can always find more information about us on our website at www.billfishrio.com. I have a Twitter account, and my co-principal investigator, Dr. Nino Ambigi, also has a Twitter account. You can follow us, and every now and then we tweet about billfish, we tweet about cool stuff that we are finding about these species. Thank you again, and thank you for giving me time to talk about this work that continues to inspire me. Thank you.
So with that, Nelly, are you ready for a couple questions?
Yes.
All right. So first, you have lots of well wishes from many of your friends in the comments, so you'll want to go and look at those later. So the first question is from Sarah, who asked, do they move into other ocean basins?
Ooh, thanks, Sarah. That's a great question, but a hard one. There's been discussions that these species can transverse across the ocean, but so far we haven't had any sort of like results that we could concretely say that that happens. We've had false recoveries for tags, but I wouldn't really say that would be conclusive that they do move. But I would like to explore that question and get back to you with more details.
Great. Another question from Sarah. She asked, in Kenya, if billfish are sold in restaurants, what is the dish like?
All right. So I have not, again, in my experience, I've not come across billfish being sold in the restaurants on the coast. But throughout my movements, especially in Mauritius and La Reunion, I had a privilege of seeing billfish on the menu, and it tastes great. The meat is a delicacy for those communities across the island nation, especially blue marlin. It's like a steak. But Sarah, I hope you're not going to be looking for blue marlin or black marlin to test the meat.
What else? Yeah, it looks like that was about it for the questions. If you want to wrap it up.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope we can continue to share this across the different platforms. I appreciate it. And thank you, New England Aquarium, for having me.